Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Josh and Jason Monday Christian and Conspiracy Podcast Show. I'm your host, Josh Monday. If you don't know me, I'm a Christian rapper, devoted husband, father, and Army veteran. And I'd like to introduce you to my co-host. He's a Christian, devoted husband, and father. What's up, Jason? How's it going, brother?
What's up, man? Just waking up from a nap right now from before, because I just cooked all day for Mother's Day. So
nice.
I don't want to be on the show and be like full of meat. I ate a whole bunch of steak today, bro. So I got food coma.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. All right. So guys, we have everybody's been asking me, can you please have Gary Wayne back? Because they loved the last show. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to fill you guys up as much as I can. Too bad he's going to be going on vacation for 3 months, but we'll try to get him on like an audio one. But
I can send you a picture or something and you can show that and we can do it audio. I just don't like, when you have a bad picture and it's freezing and stuff like that, it's never good. So
it's all good. So we got Gary Wayne on. All right, guys, I'm going to say it once again. All right. The Genesis 6 conspiracy. I just started reading it, guys, because I try to read the Bible as much as I can. I try to read, reading for me is very hard. I'm juggling 3 kids, but guys, please support this gentleman. Okay. If you go to YouTube and just look up Gary Wayne, you're going to find volumes and volumes of podcasts that he's doing. He's doing it for free, guys. And he's giving us such awesome information. So please, guys, support Gary Wayne. Purchase his book. He's got a second one on the way too. All right, go ahead, Gary.
Well, thank you for inviting me back to the show. And, it's true. I mean, I want to get information out. That's my number one goal. And if people like what I say, they can purchase my book and support me. That's the only money that I accept unless I'm going out and speaking at a conference or something like that. And if they pay the speaker to do that, then that's what so that's the only money I do. So I'm not afraid of giving out information that's in my book. And a lot of people might say, well, why do you do that? Because you want them to buy the book. I said, well, if they like what they hear, they'll probably buy the book. But if you think that what I can say on one show or a number of shows is going to really divulge everything in the book, I mean, there's just no way. There's just too much in the book. So if you like information, this is 98 chapters that keeps coming at you from chapter 1. And every chapter is a little mini story that keeps coming up one after the other and will keep coming up as the chapters unfold, but every sentence, every paragraph is absolutely loaded with facts. So very little speculation, very little opinion, and it's very well sourced. You get the bibliography, you get the footnotes, and you can verify my sources if you're a little bit apprehensive about what was just said in the book, because it talks about a lot of controversial things. But understand, I'm letting the sources speak in their own words.
Yes, for sure. So today, guys, we're going to be talking about Freemasons and the Illuminati. I think that what we did is we went over a secret society episode with Gary Wayne, and then we went to the Jesuits. We did the Black nobility. Now I'd like to dig into the Freemasons, Illuminati. So we'll just kind of we went to broad secret societies, and now we're just kind of digging deep in detail onto these secret societies. So Gary, if you could take over, and everybody that's listening that's a Gary Wayne fan, sorry guys if I interrupted him last show. Okay. I get excited, and I'm also a fan of Gary. I don't know if you guys could tell, but I love his information, but I get excited, and I will definitely let him speak more this time, and I will try to be as much courteous as possible.
Well, you're always very courteous, and the thing is I'll go on some tangents and stuff, right? That's just who I am. But what I also like is when the hosts they do interject, and you're going to ask questions, not only what you're interested in, what your audience is interested in. So feel free to do that, because I do like it as much of a dialogue and a conversation than just a sort of a download of information, so to speak. So don't be afraid to do that. So we're going to talk a little bit about Freemasonry and the Illuminati tonight. And so they are 2 separate organizations that tend to work together. And if you go back to some other shows that I've talked about here and elsewhere, you'll understand that I don't use a pyramid as my sort of organizational structure. I use a tree that has branches, more like an evergreen tree, which is very much, I think, part of the allegory of Gnosticism and the secret societies, where the evergreen tree represents immortality and godhood, and it is like the world tree that connects heaven and earth, which is again is very much part of their belief system, and where heaven and earth connected. That's where they anointed their original ring lord kings, whether or not it was at Nippur or any other location in polytheism. So I find that it's very, very important to understand their imagery so you can better understand their organization. So if you imagine a tree trunk and it's an evergreen, and the trees sort of go down like this in an evergreen, that the top of the hierarchy in terms of the branch is where it joins into the trunk and into the tree trunk organization. And in the tree trunk organizations that we've talked about in the past, you have Freemasonry at the lowest level, so that there's going to be an adept at third degree of the old York system, or 33rd degree of the Scottish Rite system, which is a little bit more prevalent, particularly in North America. And above that is, higher degrees. And I don't know how many degrees there are, but there's a lot. And the next space that is going to be held in terms of the adepthood is going to be 3 degree and higher. So look at a 3rd degree as a rookie adept, so to speak. And above that starts the Illuminati. And the Illuminati can or cannot have, they can be either have royal bloodlines. So when you hear about the Illuminati bloodlines, what you're talking about is bloodline higher degrees that would also be classified as Illuminati. So sort of like running the Illuminati from above. And so, and the Rosicrucians are higher than the Illuminati. So I think somewhere between 3 and 7 is the Illuminati, and I would probably put Rosicrucians a little bit higher, but I've been told by some people that 7 is sort of entry level Rosicrucian. So, and at the Rosicrucians, you get that threshold crossover from new blood, new money, new initiates rising up, meeting with the purebloods, and the purebloods, or the old Masonic orders, will occupy the top 50%, control the Rosicrucians. So there's still a huge difference between them, who are much higher in degrees because they're initiated from childhood, to the rising ones that are intersecting with them, rising up through Freemasonry and then to Illuminati. And then there'll be some other sort of orders within those Illuminati group and Freemasonry groups where they're controlling, but they're kind of rising up through that rank and then working into the Rosicrucian, which is, as I say, the nexus point. So if we understand that, and then if we, as we talked about in the last show, it was the Committee of 300 that's above that, of the 300 families, then the Council of 33, and then the 13 families, and that's the Western organization. And understand there'll be Eastern organizations, particularly in places like China. They are deep in secret societies, and all of those are run by purebloods. So they have a separate, and again, just sort of finish that off in case people haven't seen some of the past shows, is that there is another global organization where representatives of the 13, and I don't know exactly how many because I'm not amongst them.
They won't allow that.
Thing. I don't
not allowing that out yet, but we'll find out hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't look at that as a bad thing that I'm not there, but they would send families. So whatever number that is, as part of the worldwide global families that has another set of organizations. So you would have another structure there. So you can imagine how many degrees there are. I did a show with that had a hostess on there, and we talked afterwards for a couple hours on another day just to exchange information. And she comes out of a lot of the secret societies and the royal bloodlines, and mostly from an American perspective, but she said there's at least 100 degrees, and that could be, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I had heard as high as 35 to 40, but she was talking in degrees and organizations that were higher still. So, so you can only imagine how large and how complex this thing is. So,
and the York Rite and the Scottish Freemason, there's 2 different sides you were saying, right?
Yes, a Freemasonry.
So when you were talking about like 3rd degree, and like you just get above that, you're talking about the Scottish side or the York Rite side?
Third degree is adept in the York Rite.
Okay.
33rd degree is adept first
the
level
Scottish.
in Scottish Rite.
Yes,
So all
yes.
they've done with that is they've taken another prime number 11
Yeah.
and split up the three, right? So they
Okay.
get 33. But that's not part of the 100 we're talking about. In that numerical, it would be 3. But that doesn't mean as well that if you use that as a model, which maybe where this person might have been talking about, and I wasn't maybe listening as closely as possible, is that you could have above third degree division degrees within there, right? Just as you have 3 in each of the degrees of the York Rite that's split into Scottish, maybe that's a model that goes up. So maybe if she's talking about 100 degrees at least, that would be 33 degrees, right? Or rough and dirty on the, got it? So it's hard to know if you're looking from the outside, but so if we understand that the Illuminati is operating from 3 to 5, starts to make some sense. So when we look at the Freemasons, they are not the old Masonic society, because the old Masonic society that comes out of prehistory is the royal bloodlines, and it begat before the flood. So the secret societies were formed as an extension of the mystery schools, just as you see secret societies and brotherhoods and houses and universities today. That was the model before the flood, that was reestablished again after the flood, reinstated, with Freemasons and Rosicrucians forming the Royal Society and education outside the church thereafter. So that continues in that sort of hierarchy. And that Masonry takes their establishment from the development of the 7 sacred sciences we understand as the 7 liberal arts today, and that merged with the knowledge from the fallen angels. Then Enoch, son of Cain, not Enoch, son of Jared, there's 2 Enochs, created the sun worshiping mystical cult that's known as Enochian mysticism. So anything to deal, when you're dealing with Apocrypha, dealing with solar worship, you probably would associate that with Enoch, son of Cain, because anything to do with Enoch, son of Jared, or the Israelites, or Noah was based on the lunar calendar, right? So keep that in mind when go ahead.
Okay, so you had you talked about the Royal Society. That's like the Invisible College, right? That's like the Rosicrucian. They started that. Okay, so like anything that's coming out of there, like I believe, like scientifically, they're trying to. Don't you believe that they're kind of trying to prove the Bible wrong, like evolution, dinosaurs, Earth revolving around the sun? Which I'm not. I know that some people don't want to hear that, but So do you believe that that's what they're doing? Like everything that's coming out, they're just trying to prove the Bible wrong. That's like,
you're going to like this, because this goes pre-Bible.
Yes.
In terms of how the belief system stays the same.
Yeah.
And this is the belief system of the secret societies, right? Which is polytheist and Gnostic. So when Enoch created the 7 sacred sciences and the mystical religion to hold that knowledge that then begat the secret societies through the mystery schools, they had basically 4 main objectives. And see how that stacks up to what you see in education today.
Yes.
First one was to lead people away from God. Second one was not to give God credit for anything. So creating the universe or anything. He's an evil God who messes everything up, right? The third thing is to degrade and slander God and make him, not there, or lower him to an angelic being or just an evil creature or whatever. And then the fourth thing is to honor their pantheon of gods. And so if you look at the universities today, that's what they do. They named everything off after their gods and things, right?
Yes.
They are educating in degrees.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. All the buildings are the architecture, the masonry of the Dionysian builders, that created the knowledge to build all the great temples and buildings and palaces after the flood. And basically, we're talking about Egyptian, Greek, and Roman for the most part. You might throw in some Mesopotamian there, but it's the same concept. So all of the buildings honor their pantheon of gods. And so they're leading people away from God.
Yeah. How many people go to universities and they end up coming out atheists, right?
Yeah. They say God doesn't exist.
Yeah.
That's part of leading them away. They say God didn't create everything.
Yes.
God has nothing to do with anything that's on the earth. And it's the same agenda. And that's why it's important to understand what is going on with organizations dominated by these groups.
Yeah.
So that's the ancient society that was all royal bloodlines that then decentralizes after the fall of the Knights Templar. So understand the Knights Templar are all royal families. And even the two Benedictine monks are royal bloodlines. And many of the founders of the Knights Templar are direct relations, either cousins, uncles, whatever, with a fellow by the name of Saint Bernard, who is the second most powerful person within Catholicism next to the Pope in the time of the founding of the Knights Templar and receiving their papal bull. And he speaks on their behalf in 1128 at the Council of Troy. And he's the one who presents them with the Red Cross, kind of in honor of Baldwin and Godfrey, who were said to make the cross, the Catholic cross, before going into battle. But it's an older Red Cross order that goes back into Masonic history. So it's again, they like to use double sort of entendres. And so we have, at the fall of the Knights Templar, the greatest organization that was ever created on the earth in terms of a corporation. It invented banking.
Yeah.
It was the largest army. It was a geopolitical place where they had fortresses and offices and stations at every important road, intersection, city, right across Europe. It was the most richest organization. It was, so when it went down, it was a central organization that was more easily taken out, at least from the surface level, right?
Yeah.
So they wanted to reestablish that in a more decentralized format. And so the Rosicrucians, who we have, we talk about a lot, they're actually going to be part of the splitting away in 1188 at the cutting of the elms at Yser Castle. And their Grand Masters were the ones that are listed in the Priory of Sion as Grand Masters, which were Templar Grand Masters, and then they split off after that. If you're trying to look at
the cutting of the elms, that was when the Knights Templar split from Priory of Sion, right?
Yes, because in 1188 they had lost lost Jerusalem the year before.
Yeah.
And so the powerful bloodlines that thought this organization, even though they were still running it, had lost their way. That the people who were answering to the royal families were now more concerned with money and power and stuff like that, right? So they left in 1188 and didn't help them at the fall.
Yeah.
But that's after that, you see the order that's going to continue is the Rosicrucians, which is that Red Cross order.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
The Rosy Cross. And they start to surface in 1400, just shortly before, with the Sarkaniron order Draconis. And we'll talk a little bit in terms of how they surface right after the fall of the Templars, the first organization that's visible of that Rosy Cross order, because it's connected to the beginning of the Freemasons.
So it was about 1311, I think, right? The Knights of Templar, that's when they technically, somewhere in there, like the 1300s, right?
Well, 1307 is when they fall, right?
Okay, yeah, somewhere in there, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and that's when Clement V, he is going to basically work with the King of France, and they're going to abolish the Templars. And so in 1307, a fellow by the name of Dumont, who's a Grand Master, he sails off to Scotland with a lot of the Knights Templar adepts and knights and things, some of the wealth, some of the knowledge. The rest of the money, as we've talked about in the past, went to Switzerland, to the Hospitallers, Knights of St. John, who are already located there, that was going to set up the banking.
Yes.
And so in 1312, you have a papal bull that abolishes the Templars again, but it doesn't condemn them.
Yeah. Okay.
Very, very interesting, right? 1313, Dumont becomes the first general manager or grandmaster, GM.
It's all right. Grandmaster, it's all right.
Grandmaster of Freemasonry.
Wow.
In Scotland. and he is under the wing of Robert the Bruce and the Sinclairs. And Robert the Bruce has been excommunicated
Mhm.
by the Pope for killing his rival in a Catholic church. So he
Oh,
excommunicated him for that.
okay.
Yeah. And so what happens in 1314 then, after you have all of these knights that have gone to Scotland, is they rush the field at the Battle of Bannockburn as evening comes on, which has been misinformation, as they like to use, or reimagined as servants rushing the field to kill this mighty army coming from England
Yeah.
after they've been fighting all day. But it's the Knights Templar coming in support to win the day for Bruce, which is going to carry him to become the King of Scotland, right?
Wow.
And so you have this inner working relationship between them. And then in 13, just wanting to make sure I get this date right. In 1314, Bruce forms an order called the Royal Order of Scotland, which forms with an older order of Scotland known as the Harridan Order. That's going to become the Rosy Cross Order as it pulls away from the Freemasonic order that Dumont, as an adept Grand Master, formed in 1313. And that formalizes that split of a Rosy Cross Order in 1323. And it's actually called a Rosy Cross Order for the Templars that and it's the Royal Scotland Order, as it's also known as, that Bruce had set up. So Freemasonry starts essentially in 1313. It's, you know, it's a separately lower organization as you look at the bloodlines and why it continues to be slide down and be at that sort of entry level. So that's the beginning of Freemasonry with Sinclairs. And what's interesting about the Sinclairs is that is the St. Clair name that has been transliterated into Scotland, Sin as in saint and Clare.
Yeah.
That comes from the name that Rollo and his followers took after expropriating Normandy in 909, 10 or 911, and they called it the Treaty of St. Clair. So they take that name on.
Wow.
And then as a battle partner of Hugh the Great, Hugh de Péan, one of the founders, along with de Bouillon and the Anjou and all of the names that go into the Knights Templar, you have as his battle partner, and he's not listed as one of the original ones, but he is in the writings, and particularly in the St. Clair history books that they wrote in their genealogies and things that they're involved in. You have Henry de St. Clair as the battle partner. So that goes right back to the beginning of the founding of the Templars. And then you have St. Clair names that are Grand Masters in the Priory of Sion, particularly after 1188, with the cutting of the elm at Geezer Castles, because the Geezers had intermarried with the St. Clairs, right?
Yeah. That's so interesting. Jeez.
Yeah, it is. And so from that point on, you have this low-level organization that's going to flourish with a Rosy Cross Order that's above Freemasonry in Scotland. And then at the time of King James, probably a little bit forward, but sort of an official sort of launch into England comes Freemasonry with King James Stuart, right? Who, and the Stuart clan.
King James Stuart, is King James the one that wrote the Bible? I mean, not wrote the Bible, but the King James Bible, right?
Yes.
Wow. And so he was a Stuart then, right?
Yes.
I didn't even know that. Okay, so that's cool. That's good information for me to dig into, because that's interesting.
And the Stuart bloodline provides a male for the daughter of Bruce because he doesn't have any sons.
Okay.
And so the Bruce line goes to the Stuart line. And then all of the scioning of those bloodlines, that includes all of the Plantagenet and all of the Celtic, I mean, it's the most ennobled bloodline in the world of that time.
Wow. Okay.
And so they're initiated from childhood. So you have these depictions of King James being initiated in Scotland into Freemasonry. That's just ceremonial because he was an adept before he was an adult. It was so far above but it's just showing sort of patronage and adding that to part of his titles, right? Because he was above it all the time. And so you would have that happen sort of with the Illuminati as well. Now, Freemasonry, they have a specific goal that was assigned to them, a specific agenda, as all the core organizations do. And they also have other societies who report into them at that level, at that low level. So just as you have in the Catholic Church, you have the Knights of Columbus as one of these lower level ones that would have higher level Grand Masters from the various Gnostic orders, from the Knights of St. John, the Jesuits, all of these monastic orders. They would be, running those organizations or initiatory organizations within Catholicism, just as the Elks or the Lions Club or all of these other organizations that are societies, but not like a Masonic society would be. And they would have people who are below 33rd degree or third degree that would be working in with those groups, not able to pass on significant knowledge because they're not told the truth until they become an adept.
Yeah.
And you may even have one of the adepts that is overseeing that with the people that they're sending out to these organizations. So when you have multiple lodges in an area, you have one individual that would be like a regional manager, and he'd be a Grand Master, a Master Mason.
Yeah.
And he would be 2 degrees higher. So you have to be 5th degree, as I understand it, to oversee these other groups. And then, of course, Grand Masters from, the local lodge and the regional, they're going to, go to regular meetings with the Grand Council in whatever country that they're in America's case, in Washington.
Are all like the American branch of Freemasonry? Are they all Scottish, right? Because I noticed that they're usually
Not all.
Not all. Okay, some of them, most of them, yeah.
Yeah,
I've noticed that they're
and they still report technically to the Grand Lodge in London.
Yeah. Okay.
So you have this Freemasonry group then that's now coming down into England at the time, and a lot of people say, well, it's after that, but you have to understand who King James was. So you're seeing the beginnings of that at that time, and maybe even a little bit sooner. But it's going to grow up with the Stuart dynasty in England, and the whole Jacobite thing is a Masonic or bunch of Masonic organizations that are battling for a Catholic king versus a Protestant Stuart king, right? So it's just sort of an internal battle. But what's important about Freemasonry, after they get going in England, then they're going to use this great empire that sort of begat with Elizabeth and James and the English Commonwealth. So as the Commonwealth is established, they're going to set up lodges around the world. And the Illuminati, once they're formed, we'll get to, they're going to use these branches around the world because they're working at the adept level at the Freemasons, with the Freemasons, right? They're part of that leadership level. So you have this organizational structure that's being set up, and then you have with the Jacobite movement a crossover that is going to go into Europe, and you start to see it happening in the 1700s, maybe a little bit before, into France with this Masonic movement, so that by the time of the French Revolution in 1790, they're going to be at the core of that rebellion. Right? Just again, different faction from the Jacobites, right? And because you understand that the French dynasty was more loyal to Catholicism than Protestantism. So you've got that sort of battle that's going on. And that's called continental Masonry.
Okay.
As it spreads through back into Europe. And they're going to link up with sister organizations that were sort of already there. But anyways, hopefully that helps people with understanding what's continental Masonry, how did it sort of spread around the world. And if you understand that Masons were part of the whole education system, just as the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons created the Royal Societies that created education, and that they were part of the sort of what I would call younger branch organizations within the universities. Then one understands that they have prepared people all throughout the whole government system.
Would you say that's the
and the
responsibilities of them?
military.
That's their
Sorry, guys.
responsibilities,
Yeah.
like branch.
I had to jump up. My
No.
cat keeps making this noise. I'm so sorry, guys. I don't know where it's at.
So you're saying is that they're if you're a Mason, is like a Freemason, and that then you're going through that. That's your main thing is education, and
Yes.
like that's their branch to take over and to oversee.
Yeah.
education.
So it's a great point, and it leads me to what their agenda is. And they're assigned for politics and for the military.
Yeah.
So if when you understand that, you'll understand why there's so many Masons within the politics. They're going to be led, as we talk a little bit more about how the Illuminati is involved in that, and why the Masons were so involved with the military and still are today, and why so many of the original founders of America were Freemasons, including George Washington and Benjamin Franklin. And
There's a ton you can name.
yeah,
So the Knights of Malta, are they because there was this chart that I saw, like on the right side it was 33 degrees, and then like on the left side there was like this chart, and at the top of was like Knights of Malta and the Knights Templar still with like running underground. Are they still part of the Freemasons?
No,
not at all.
They're separate groups. I mean,
Okay.
the Masons have rituals to the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar, there is some high level, small organizations that are working behind the scenes that still call themselves Knights Templars or KTs.
Yes.
Just as you still have KTs that are in part of the rituals of Freemasonry. And so Freemasonry and the Knights of St. John is way above that. This is pure blood, high level families of kings, right?
Okay.
So, yeah. So would they be sort of working down and into those? Yes, to a certain degree, because not only are the Knights of St. John within the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, but the Windsor family and the Queen, to one part of it, is also
Protestant
considered
side.
the head, right?
Yes.
And that's
Protestant
because
side
of the territorial rights of Malta,
Yes.
right?
She was the
So-
Queen of Malta at one time, right? So 1965 to 75 or something is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So that-
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
like that.
again, the complexity of the organizations and how it changes through the generations, it can get a little bit sort of confusing. But if we understand then that the Masons are, bringing people into the Gnostic religion, and that the Gnostic religion is mysticism, you'll understand that the Essenes, as we've talked about in the past, is part of this significant organizational structure, and have rituals to this day still within Freemasonry, and the handshakes and a lot of the hand signals is all part of the Essenes. And the Essenes were the first ascetic monastic order in the West, that all the Gnostic orders within Catholicism, like the Franciscans, like the Benedictines, like the Augustines, and all the other ones, and even including Opus Dei, which is called, Christian social masonry within the church that was created in the 30s. It's all set up on that Essene order because they were polytheists.
Yeah.
Who believed in the religion of Heliopolis that they believed Moses originally brought, and then monotheism went rogue. And anyways, we won't go down that road, but understand that. And I've got a great document on the scenes if people want. I'll walk you through it, what the historians say and how we know from the Bible when they're talking about that. So the Masons then play a very large role in bringing people into the secret society, but you have to be invited. And
Yeah.
so they're tracking you down based on your genealogies and your
Yeah.
bloodlines.
You have to feel,
Right.
because I've been asked when I was in the military, and I also was asked when I was doing real estate at one time. And they invite you, they want you to fill out a whole sheet. They want to look at your ancestry. They want to
Yep.
find out, they're going to actually research you and do all this
Yes.
stuff on you. So yeah. But I never joined, guys, right? Just let you guys know. Never joined. My dad taught me since I was
Yes.
My dad taught me since I was young, never to join that type of stuff. So,
Yeah.
but anyways.
So let's move on and talk a little bit about the Illuminati then, that operate at the adept level. And most people look at the Illuminati as being created sometime in the 1700s. And
May 1st, 1776, right?
Yeah, and with Adam Weishaupt.
Yeah.
But actually, there's historical records that show that part of the organization as being visible. But that's between 1770 and 1776. You're going to have a merger going on. So you have an older organization that's been established that's going to merge with Freemasonry. And again, this is, from the approach of the continental masonry that we talked about, crossing over to mainland Europe, and also with the Illuminati organization recognizing what England is doing with their expansion around the world, as with France, right? And they're going to work through those lodges in both of those empires at the adept level. So they're going to utilize the resources of Freemasonry, which gives this really great look to the world, that they're this great organization. It's good for business. They do charities, and it's all a front so that they can do what they're planning and wanting to do behind the scenes at the adept level. But the Illuminati actually, even though it is a group of young aristocracy in Germany that is going to sort of begin it in terms of that visible name. And they call themselves the Enlightened Ones, which is where the name Illuminati comes from. And they were very much anti-Christian. And I'll come back to that in a couple of minutes. And they pretend to have, the true religion of Lucifer. I mean, they just come right out and they call it the true religion. That's why Theosophy also uses that same logo. This is the true religion, because Theosophy is a branch out of Gnosticism, which is the religion of the secret societies. And that's the religion that they wanted to have for the end time in place, that would have a religion that would harmonize science and religion. Not science and Christianity, but science and polytheism, where it goes back to in history. So they're going to reimpose polytheism behind the scientific beliefs as the wizards behind the curtain, just as the Rosicrucians called themselves the last of the sorcerers and the first of the scientists, with the creation of the Royal Society. And they have the philosophy of Machiavelli that they adopted, that the ends justifies the means. And Machiavelli lived between 1469 and 1527. And so, again, we're starting to see some looks that this is a little bit older organization that has this mythos of this upstart in the 1700s. But they're to be able to be an adept level organization that wants to work worldwide. That's going to work at the top level of Freemasonry. That just doesn't happen out of the blue, right?
No,
so they have
for
to
sure.
have an older history. And so it actually looks like they might have began in about the 1500s. And
so the Jesuits started 1540. So you think the Illuminati was starting somewhere in the 1500s as well?
Yes.
Okay.
And just before the start of the Jesuits, because the Jesuits begin in about 1523 to 1525 with Ignatius and his visions of Mary and him becoming a soldier of the church to bring in the new Babylon.
And it's interesting because the Jesuits disbanded in 1773, supposedly, right? And then 1776, the Illuminati comes out, right? So it's and then his dad, Illuminati, Adam Weishaupt, was also like he was a priest, or his dad was a priest for the Jesuits, I heard, or something of the source. So yeah, it's interesting stuff,
the-
man, that all that
and the-
connects together.
And the Jesuits interpret everything through the seven sacred sciences, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
again,
Same thing. Yeah.
yeah. So they talk the same lessons.
Yeah.
So what happened was there's this large group of people, and I would say it was even further than just in Rome. I would say throughout places like where the Medicis were in Florence and in Venice.
Yeah.
I would say, you have these groups of intelligent, mostly nobility that is developing the seven sacred sciences, right? And it's part of the Renaissance, and that starts in about 1400 or so with the Sarkhan Iran, with the pursuits of Thoth, and we've covered that in past shows. But these were astronomers and physicists and mathematicians that were working at a feverish pace and developing doctrine and scientific thought and exploring the universe that was designed to hurt the Catholic Church, right? To lead people away from God. And they called themselves the Enlightened Ones. So
Same
this
as
is
the Illuminati.
the Illuminati.
Yeah.
And so this is sort of the Illuminati bloodline. If you want to look at that from that terminology, this is that Illuminati bloodline of the families of Florence, of the families of Venice, of the Black nobility that we talked about in the past, and how that is part of the larger Black nobility of Europe, which is also known as Rex Deus, that they have to go underground, and it starts to move away, that center move away, and it actually moves towards through the Habsburgs and into Germany, where you get the mythos beginning of the Illuminati. So that's kind of the older history. So yeah, I would take their beginnings back to around to the 1500s. So you have a lot of rebuilding of secret societies in a decentralized sort of fashion between the beginning of Freemasonry after the fall of the Knights Templars through to about 1550 or so, where you sort of get all of the organizations that are complete, because you also are going to have the Bauer family of the Rothschilds, who are going to be formed in the 1700s as well to replace the banking arm, right?
Yeah.
And the Bauer family grows rich funding Masonic organizations and the royal family and the Illuminati,
Yeah.
all of them through working through the Bank of Frankfurt. And they changed their name to the Rothschilds in 1811 when they open up, or 1798 when they open up the London Bank. And they change it to a name that's different than Bauer to sort of get rid of that sort of Jewish sort of aspect, because they had Jewish bloodlines as well. And so that is another one of those key organizations, banking outside the church. Jesuits are banking inside of the church, as we've covered.
Yeah.
So the Illuminati's agenda is basically twofold. Is they work towards world government as their primary goal.
Yeah.
From a geopolitical power perspective, and to destroy Christianity. That is their twofold goals. And so when you hear about Masonic incursions into the church, that's probably going to be sponsored by Illuminati than Freemasons.
Okay.
Right. But then understand the lower Freemasons, they may be attending the church and doing some of the
Charity work.
legwork, but they
Yeah,
don't know the true agenda of what the adepts are doing, and it's sponsored by the Illuminati. And that when you start to look at then organizations other than the Freemasons that they're working with, that they're now into all of these branch organizations that intersect into them. So you might think of the Skull and Bones as well.
Yeah.
Which is, and it's a really good one. This is a university secret society.
So Masons are
the Ivy League.
You said Masons are the schooling. So yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And they are Illuminati families.
Yeah.
So and in America, they are a lot of pseudo blue bloods, new money that
The
you
Bush
know,
family.
they're
stuff
they're
like that.
moving up the family through intermarriage, and then they get to send their children to these schools, and then they go into societies. But the Skull and Bones is the sort of stepping stone into the CFR
Yeah.
and all of the, you know, trilateral commissions and things like that. So they're educating people at Ivy League or bloodline universities to go into the political arena, both within the country and around the world.
Yeah. So CFR, Council of Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group,
So basically subvert. So
all the
they're
think
basically subverting their-
tanks.
All the think tanks, yeah.
Yeah.
So like the Rhodes Society is sponsored, for example, of the Illuminati. The roundtables.
What's with all
Obviously
the
are.
what's with all the visuals though? They always like have like the I always see like they always say like their eyes or their like what is up with that? Why are they trying to put it with that? Like because there's a lot of like the hidden hand and stuff like that, and the there's just a lot of different signs that go with
Handshakes,
Oh, yeah, you
different
can tell.
signs.
Like, oh man, that guy's part of that crew. It's like why they want you to see it, but they don't want to admit it. It's there, you know. They want you to
Mhm.
see the sign of it, but they don't.
Well, they're communicating to their own people who understand the signs, right? And so they also are trying. It's part of a ritual sort of thing that they do. So what they're doing is they're imposing their polytheist ritual on whatever function, event that they might be at. So you might want to look when you see them doing that, what else is representative of the occult that's there? Because it's probably going to be, you know, everywhere. And they're just sort of saying, we can do everything we want in plain sight, and you have no idea what we're doing.
And nobody really realizes it until you start digging deep, like how you do and like how researchers do. You know, you're not
Yeah.
going to find it, or you got to be Christian too. You know, have some discernment because, geez, it's right there in our face. You know,
Yeah.
see it. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, so I would say the Fabian Society is another one that would be answering into the Illuminati. When some people say the Rosicrucians and the Fabian Society and the Rhodes Society, I mean, they basically sponsored the socialist movement in
Yes.
England and the Socialist Party there, which again, all socialism is called social masonry. It's it's designed for the Western families to gain more power and bring down rivals.
Yeah. Wow. That's it. Yeah, that's interesting. And you said that ultimately they want to have that government coming in, right? You said that
Yeah.
on the last episode. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, and they want to have, because what it does is it instantly has this oligarchic elite at the top.
Yeah.
And
they love it.
It's National Socialism on a globalist scale.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's where you have oligarchies that are working with the government and carrying out government policy, so that they're basically one of the same. So that's why we're seeing corporations and powerful, rich people getting more political these days, and all in this socialism sort of direction. So a lot of people might say, well, pure socialism isn't defined that way. I get that. They don't care. They created it. They can shape it any way they want. Communism wasn't designed that way. Anarchism, at the far left end, is designed for its agenda of just creating anarchy so that they can impose their socialist governments. But at the end of the day, even with communism, they lost control of communism. That wasn't supposed to go quite as rogue as it did. It's the same as National Socialism with Hitler. But if you look at today, you see in modern history, you have places like Russia who have basically gone National Socialism, even though Putin doesn't like to call it that.
Mhm.
He has basically one party rule, and it's run by oligarchs. And the oligarchs work with government policy.
Yeah.
So he can call Zelensky a Nazi all he wants, but he's operating a classic Nazi operation. Classic misinformation, classic left,
Yeah.
whatever whatever they accuse you of doing is what they're doing.
Well, he's got $200 billion, I heard, so he's
Yeah.
definitely on top right now, loving it,
Yeah,
loving getting
200
the
billion
money.
that you see on the books. We don't
Yeah,
know
yeah,
what's
yeah.
underneath. Yeah.
Jeez.
And that's why you
Jeez.
see communist
Evil.
China, they moved away from that to this Chinese capitalism, which is basically Nazism, oligarchs again, that
Yeah.
were all government officials. But what communism and socialism does, it wipes out everything but the upper class, right?
Yeah,
And then whatever else they
course.
want to allow underneath. So they get that upper rule instantaneously.
And
so
they
it's
love
a great
it.
tool. And they love
Yeah.
it.
Gosh, it's terrible, man.
Yeah.
Man, we can't win. Gary, what are we gonna do? We need to write some books, man, some more books and make some. We need to get some money, man, so we can knock these guys out of there. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So the Illuminati is a very, very important group, but they're just so high on the scale, right? And so again, as I said, they're going to have people from the purebloods that are being represented in the closed circle of the hierarchy of that organization that are directing them, and then they're directing their lower levels, and then it goes, downstream from there. So, but again, look for, Masonic and Illuminati working on the politics, as well as, the Masons, Freemasons are into the military. And you also have the world government aspect. So that's why you see so much prominent Illuminati symbolism in politics, along with Masonic, right? Because they're trying to bring about world government. So they have to be involved at the politics level, but at a higher sort of level, and that's why their position is a little higher.
Do you think that this whole thing that happened, this pandemic, do you think that was like a test run for world government? Because I noticed that everybody was running full circle. Everybody was doing the same thing in every country, and the countries that didn't do it, it seems like they actually took out their leaders. They had heart attacks or they got assassinated. And then everybody started complying. The whole world was working together for this. I mean, it seemed like the same thing. Do you think that was like a practice run for them, for world government?
Yeah, but let me back up a little bit and then get back to where you're on that, so that we get a better understanding of what's going on here. So, and we're going to use the pandemic, the pestilence that came about. And we should understand that there's a fig tree generation. And I think we might be in the fig tree generation. And I think that probably begins in 1967 with visible southern kingdom of Judea, whatever number of that original remnant is there in the covenant land, and having Jerusalem, and that this is the fig tree that represents Judea in prophecy, and also the one that Jesus killed just before he completes his commission and does the oration on the signs of the end times. And he describes it as the fig tree generation when you see that blooming, right?
Yes.
And Jerusalem is basically the epicenter of all end time prophecy. Like everything is around Jerusalem in end time. So it has to be there, and it has to be in possession of Judea for end time prophecy to be fulfilled. So how long is a generation? Well, you get a choice of 40 years in the book of Exodus, 70 years in the book of Psalms, or 120 years in Genesis 6:3. So it could be anywhere from 70 years, which would put us into the 2030s as the maximum generation, or it could be longer.
It's got to be 2030. You know the 2030 agenda
2037.
2030.
Well,
there we go.
That's the timetable that the polytheists are working towards, because they understand prophecy, and that's why they're so frenetic, right?
Wow.
Whether or not it happens that fast or not, we need to be open to that, but we also need to be open that it might be longer, and that the polytheists don't control when the end time comes. In the last 7 years, that's
only the
ordained
Father
by
knows.
God.
Yeah, only the Father knows. Yeah, no man knows.
If we understand then part of the other signs in the fig tree generation, you have the days of Noah, and that follows the fig tree generation. So it's got to be like that. And we're catching up to that technology and everything else. And
of course,
in days of Noah before the flood, you had Atlantis with 10 kings, which was the helm of world government with a mystical religion. And that's why Francis Bacon is trying to set up the new Atlantis. But just as importantly, we have the beginning of sorrows, the beginning of the birth pangs, which
Yes.
is the third overarching one that begins in about Matthew 24:8 and is talked about in Mark, and we see examples of that also in Luke 17 and 21. So what you have is wars and rumors of war,
Yep.
which are going to get stronger as we go.
Yes.
You're going to have pestilence getting stronger as we go.
Mhm.
You're going to get earthquakes getting stronger as we go, and those are already happening, just as
Yep.
pestilences are getting stronger
Yep.
as we go. And you're going to have famines that are going to get stronger, which
We're
they all
seeing
tend
right
to work-
now.
Yep,
We're seeing that
and
right now.
they all tend to work together, but I think how the end time comes about, there's an ordained time, but God allows everything to happen through free choice.
Mhm.
So that means these are probably contrived catastrophes and ones that they can predict, because you're going to have false prophets as they get stronger predicting these types of catastrophes. So they have to be able to control it.
Mhm.
And so we get sort of, let's say, an early birth pang of this when Trump comes to power in January 2017. Fauci says that within Trump's reign, he's going to see a global pandemic that he can't control.
Yep.
And then, of course, he's linked to the funding and the development of a contrived disease out of China.
Yeah.
I know.
So look for contrived catastrophes. So
Yes.
yes, these are beginning of the birth pangs of the false prophets.
Mhm.
And I think there will be true sort of religious zealot prophets, not just the sorcerers like Fauci,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
As the scientists.
Yep.
And just as sorceries, Babylon deceives the whole world, which is pharmakia,
Yep. All right.
root word for pharmaceuticals, and where
Yep.
medications illegal and legal come from, including vaccines. So
Yeah. Yeah.
you see the sort of connection where if you understand this as contrived, and it's going to happen more and more and more and more as we go, just as you see Putin trying to create a larger position in the New World Order, just as Trump was trying to do,
Mhm.
and just as Xi in China is trying to do. That's beginning of the wars and the rumors of war. So we're going to see
Yeah.
that get stronger.
China wants to take Taiwan out. Russia's taking out
Yeah.
Ukraine, just trying to, like, and then we got
Yeah. So
the
we're going
seven.
to see all of that. So the first big opportunity, though, in terms of these birth pangs, comes about with a contrived catastrophe, with the pestilence that we just went through over the last couple of years. And they get to test a whole bunch of different things,
Uh-huh.
right?
Oh.
And they got the chance to see what worked and
Yep.
what didn't work. And then they got different waves. So they could push this way and that way more. This is all practice for what's coming, what
Yeah.
they can do and what they need to, what they will do for the next go around. So if you think that they were totalitarian,
Yeah. Just wait.
non-scientific, the only political science that was going on there was religious political science.
Yeah.
And
So,
political
Gary,
science in particular, and junk science.
It's interesting because they had like everybody's name, address, phone number, medical record number of people that did comply, who didn't comply. They knew exactly what they had to pull away to make somebody comply. Like, I took away the sports, I took away the stadiums, I took away this. People complied, so now they know what to do with the mark of the beast. They know what to take away to make people comply. Like, is it food I got to take away? Is it beer? Is it alcohol? Is it cigarettes? Is it stadiums? What is it?
Take it all away.
You're right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Take it all away.
But yeah. So the Illuminati, you said, is the world government, that they're part of that. So they've been working hard, it looks like, recently, definitely. And the Masons obviously as well, with taking people away from God, because there's so many people away from God right now. So
right.
it all connects.
And you just see how at the political level of the leadership that they're all talking the same language in pretty much every country around the world.
Yes.
So I don't think it's going to be that much longer before you see not a new strain. I mean, it could be the same thing, just going all the time, but I think we're going to see other strains. And what's really interesting in what happened, and it's gone absolutely dead in terms of reporting on it, but there was a report, and it was Victoria, I can't remember her last name, but she was She's part of the State Department. She's been there forever. She was reporting before Congress and said that she was quite concerned about the Russians getting a hold of these labs that were in the Ukraine, that were the
Yep.
old Russian labs.
Yep.
And so if she was afraid that they would get their old technology, that would make no sense.
Nope.
But they were also funding these labs. They're not operating them, but they funded all of these labs that were doing the same thing that was going on in Wuhan.
Wow.
And so I think there's going to be more biological weapons that are launched as part of war. And China has said all along, and they have another lab in Wuhan that works side by each with this one that does research, and it's a military medical development lab of the
Jeez.
same sort of nature. You don't hear reporting on that a whole bunch, but they have said that the next major war will be fought with biological weapons, and they will be prepared.
Yeah. Yeah, they're trying to get the best biological weapon. That's what they're researching for. So yeah, the bird flu also, that I heard that's coming
Yep.
strong as well. And there's
Lots
there's
of
stuff
avian
everywhere.
flu.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're right.
So we're in the age of these pandemics getting stronger. And so we're in the age of the globalists becoming more vicious,
Yeah.
more in your face, more totalitarian. They're talking about eliminating any view other than what's theirs.
Yes.
Not only just canceling, but they don't want, even people who were supporting them, like Elon Musk in the time of Obama, is now, hey, you didn't pull the line. We're going to see whether we can destroy you. We'll see whether
They even shut the churches down, man. They went so far as to even shutting the churches down in America.
They would.
So
I believe that
this
was for them.
They loved it.
The best outcome that they got away with.
Because look at the Illuminati. You said they're trying to take out Christianity, right? So they see that they could take away the churches, and people are okay with it. No one even said anything at first. It was like 30 days.
Our leadership was absolutely non-existent on a 99.99%. So if you understand then that the Illuminati has infiltrated the seminary schools.
Oh yeah, I know that. We had a show on that actually, Gary. So yeah.
So you see that being manifested in the fact that the churches, for the most part, not all, but 99% or whatever the number is, do not teach prophecy or prehistory. They are not preparing the people for what's coming. And that's because they're told not to teach it.
Yeah. And they're talking about, don't worry, guys, we're going to be raptured. You know what I mean? Like, that's not 100%. That's not 100% at all. So what they do is they want to gather people like, hey, come to our church. They're really about getting members instead of blasting out the truth and making sure people are prepared. And I think that's utterly ridiculous, but I love now my church. Okay. I love you, Pastor Daniel. If you listen to this, I love you, but listen, we have to take the bull by the horns, listen to what Gary's saying. This is real right here. Seriously.
And what we can't do is not permit ourselves to gather. And so we have to be able to take a stand to talk out in large numbers and assert in large numbers that it's not this false choice that is always provided, right? When you have places that are being closed down and they aren't the super spreaders, it's just done for political science and totalitarian reasons. There are ways to accommodate, right?
Yeah.
If you could have people at a stadium, you could have people in churches, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So lay down
Walmart, you can have people in churches, come on.
So the same criteria. We need to be able to speak out in that sort of manner.
Yeah.
And that if that requires wearing a mask, still let us assemble and let us sing through a mask.
Yeah, I know. It's so ridiculous.
It's absolutely, and we need to be able to say, no, it's not just two choices. And even in the labor force is going to need to get better at this too. Just look at all the medical people who, because they weren't vaccinated, lost their jobs, or the truckers or whatever. Instead of saying, no, it's not this or that, how do we accommodate them so that they can still work and be safe?
Of course.
But they're not focused on the vulnerable.
No.
I mean, it's like it's a mass ritual of
Yes.
sacrifice that they know all along that over 90% of the people that are going to die
Yeah.
are people with core mobilities or core
Yeah.
the word I'm
Mobilities. Yeah.
struggling
Yeah.
with it right now. Yeah.
It's okay.
And or just of your age. And in all pestilences past, they isolated the people who were sick, not the people who weren't sick. And right out of the gate, if they had gone and protected the people they knew were most vulnerable, they would have saved many, many, many lives. And they weren't interested in saving lives. In fact, they were only interested in the pharmakeia aspect
Yeah, I
of
know.
the distribution, and anything that was therapeutic
I
was
know.
absolutely banned because they weren't interested in saving people. They were only interested
Yeah.
in having all of the oligarchs, whether or not it's from the pharmakeia organizations or the Amazons of the world or the corporate, all the oligarchs got rich, and free enterprise and corporations are a corruption of free enterprise. All the free enterprise, smaller companies got
Crushed.
shellacked.
They
Yeah.
got crushed and they had no problem with it. It was so
Yeah.
crazy. You're right. The totalitarianism was just insane. I made songs about it. I was really vocal about it. I was vocal about the church being shut down on some of my songs. I'm glad that we have this platform now so we can, do the best we can, even though we get censored. But anyways, yeah, it's crazy. But we got to know, guys, we're talking about the Freemason Illuminati. Everything that Gary Wayne is talking about, it connects to the stuff we're talking about here. So,
but the mistake that the response was made in this is they allowed us, in the arguments to be made foolish through the junk science and the political science that was going. So we have to be careful about how we go about this. We may know that the vaccines may not protect everybody. We may not like some of the kinds that are being produced.
yeah.
We may not like masks and things like that. But what we have to be able to do is argue our position from a position of being able to associate
Yeah.
and to broadcast without getting into the minutia that the fake media can use against us.
Yeah.
And I think we allowed too many,
Yeah.
maybe partially right at times and partially wrong arguments that were out there. And we ought to have been arguing about, okay, we understand there's a pestilence.
Yeah.
We understand that there's things that we need to do, but you can't do this, but you could allow us to do this, and this. And we're here in numbers to protest.
Yeah. It was so crazy. We laid down, we folded like a lawn chair in the beginning. Everybody did. Even you can find guys in Compton that are gangbangers that have been selling crack for 20 years, fighting people, shooting people, and they're out there with the blue mask on. You know what I mean? Like everybody was giving up. Even I'm telling you, man, there's some people that I know that are rappers they're like gang members. Like they kill people and they're all masked up. When I'm talking to them on the phone, like what the? Okay, this is insane. But yeah, everybody folded though, definitely in the beginning. But anyways,
and it was junk science all the way through when they didn't have N95 masks, which are the only ones that really work.
Yes,
unless you're going to wear this big glass thing and
which I saw
squeezy ones that
I still
work over
see
your nose.
I still see people wearing those today, man. It's crazy, but
and we still don't have the ability to manufacture that. So they had everybody putting on masks that didn't work.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, they were laughing with the control and how stupid people
I know. And they're at parties too, like with no mask on, hanging out, drinking cocktails.
Yeah, exactly. And nobody has held them accountable. Where's the manufacturing plants if these things are going to work? And I do believe N95 works a lot better. May not be foolproof. I mean, because they foolproof, but they were using them in hospitals before, right?
Yeah.
So there's a degree that that's going to work. The reason why they don't in hospitals in Canada, where I'm from, they don't use the N95s because they cost so much money. Because even with those, with the pestilences, they got to get rid of them on a regular basis. So they're wearing just those blue cloth ones. They squeeze it down, but they got this big welder shield sort of thing over their face. But they do that because of cost. But at the same time, they're still not they were also forced there in part
Well,
because there's no N95s manufacturing to supply them with. I mean,
Yeah.
and they never done anything. They never did anything about it.
No, they didn't care. I mean, it's all
don't
population
care.
control too, man.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question, Gary.
Yep.
So the Jesuits and the Freemasons, do they work
Yes.
together? Are they
Well-
like binded? Because I've heard people say that the black Pope is over the Freemasons. I don't know. I've also heard that the Prince Andrew is over the York side of the Freemasons. The Order of Garters on top of Freemasons. Is it? Who's
Well,
at the
through the
very
Knights of
top?
St. John and thing, you get some crossovers, but the
Yeah.
history is that after the Jesuits were created and after 1570, when Borgia takes over as the Grand Master of the Jesuits from the Contessa order, which is obviously bloodline Masonic society, is they start to coordinate with Freemasonry.
Mhm.
And they're actually working together. They're within Freemasonry. There's crossover.
Okay, so they were
The
working
thi-
together.
but it, after a while, they have to split. What's
Mhm.
happening is the Jesuits are trying to actually get control over Freemasonry. So you
Yeah.
have a little bit of this rivalry. So they basically punt them
Yeah.
and say, you have your own agenda that you
Yeah.
need to do within the church. We have ours, and you're not going to run
Okay.
our organization. So there's still a bit of a rivalry there from what I can tell, but they still work directionally
Yeah.
in the same direction. And
Yeah.
the Jesuits are social masonry. So I mean they're
Yeah. They're pretty much doing this. Okay, so they got
Yeah.
the same goal, but they're not working together as much as before.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
and it doesn't matter whether it's bloodlines or it's organizations, there's still the power aspect of it.
Yeah.
And there's still the money aspect of it. And so there's always going to be rivalries.
And there's always these black nobility bloodlines and these like you said, the Council of 13, they're basically on top. So they're just
Yes.
controlling each of these organizations. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff.
Yeah. And I don't know whether I mentioned this earlier, within the bloodlines, like everybody who's part of the bloodlines, if you accept your role within your family, and to a certain degree, you can choose not to, but then you're excluded from everything. But every individual has a specific role.
Hmm. Okay.
So there's a lot of interaction across the board from the pure bloodlines in all of these organizations, because each member of these royal families all around the world, they have specific functions.
Yeah.
Nobody gets a free ride. Everybody has responsibility that obviously, gets to be quite significant as it goes downstream in terms of
Okay.
how much they would oversee.
Hmm. Interesting. All right, so we're at about an hour and 18. I think we covered pretty much. Is there anything else you want to leave off with? So we're gonna end probably in the next 5 minutes here. Anything you want to end off with, Gary?
I think when we look at secret societies, we need to understand them individually, which is why it's good to do shows like this and show how they sort of connect. But this organization of polytheist organizations that are in all countries all around the world, it's so many different organizations, both politically, economically. I mean, every aspect is so big that your mind can go to mush. And if you're trying to make it fit into things, like pyramids or something, it just doesn't sort of make sense. And so you see all of these simple little pictures that show the
I know.
organizational structure.
I'm guilty of
and
it
it's
too.
like, right? And it's going like, well, what about this organization? Well, what about that? I
Yeah.
mean, well, you can't fit it in, right? It
Yeah.
is so large, and its sheer size, not only is it scary, but you can understand why people refuse to believe something could be that well organized,
Yeah.
that powerful, that influences everything. We swim in a baptism of polytheist rituals on everything we feel, touch, and affects our senses, because we live in their world. They run everything, and they get the authorization from the fallen angels to their spurious offspring through the bloodlines that control the religions, the governments, the armies, all the business. And
Wow.
there is nothing we can really do anywhere that they haven't infiltrated and are trying to corrupt further. So whatever we carve out in terms of our space, again, we don't want to be barbarians, but we have to make sure that we understand how they influence our organizations and our product, and how they influence what they will permit us to say.
Yeah.
And we have to recognize that, so we know how to speak. We know how to keep those spurious ones out of our organizations and not drafting us as part of fulfilling their agenda.
We need to know too that they've infiltrated the churches, and find out how they infiltrated the church, and make sure that you're getting taught the right doctrines, So I think
Yes.
that's important for us Christians for sure.
And the first thing for me, and I know I'll get pushback on this, but if they're taking in an interpretive approach, that's Gnosticism.
Yeah.
If they're not teaching prehistory and prophecy, that's a Gnostic doctrine.
Wow. Yeah.
So if you see anything that's occultic or Masonic,
yeah,
as things in that church, that's a sign.
Yep. So look for it. Yeah, definitely look for it, and make sure that your pastor's not a Freemason, and in some way, if you find out, I mean, I've heard like 70% of Baptist pastors are Freemasons. So
Yeah.
just be careful out there, guys. We love you guys. And Gary, we'll definitely have you back. I'm going to be reading your book for the next month or so. And I'm going to I'll find some subjects, or if you want to send me a subject that you want to go over, let me know. I'm open anytime to come on. If I could have you, I'd like to try to have you on once a month or once every 2 months, if that's possible, man, because you do a great job. And I think our audience really, really enjoys you. So I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, what I would also like to, maybe get some feedback from your audience, and they can send it in to you, or they can get a hold of me. But what subjects would they like to have talked about? Because
Yes.
what we're here is well, for me, I mean, I like to talk about what people are wanting to know more about, or what's at the top of their list. So yeah, I mean, whatever the subject, let's talk on that, as opposed to
us choosing it. All right. So guys, you heard him. So if you guys want to comment below, let me know what you guys want us to talk about, what subject you want us to talk about. I'll hit Gary Wayne up. I'll email him. Or if you want to get a hold of him, tell him, hey, on Josh Monday, Christian and Conspiracy Podcast, I'd like you guys to talk about this. And we'll get into it. Jason, thank you, bro. Tell your wife I said happy Mother's Day. All the mothers out there, Gary, tell your wife as well. All the mothers out there, happy Mother's Day. Sorry, we should have started the show like that, but I start getting into what Gary's saying, and I just go from there. But happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. We're going to end this in prayer. Also, before we end, like I said, guys, Genesis 6 Conspiracy. Look how thick this book is. It's all information. He talked to me earlier. He talked about all the sources he had to go through. It's so interesting to just find out this stuff. It's good if you are a Christian and you start finding out this type of information. The devil's not going to be able to he's not going to be able to trick you as easy, because you're going to find out all the tricks. This type of book is awesome to go through. Read the Bible, guys. Let's get into it. I'm going to end this in prayer real quick. So, Father God, in the name of Jesus, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to talk to Gary, and for introducing us to Gary. And, we're just trying to expose the evil here, Lord. If you could, I want to pray for all the mothers out there. And I know how tough it is for them when fathers are gone at work. They're taking care of their kids at home. I just want to pray for all the mothers out there, all the families out there. Lord, if you could please just bless them and help them when they're taking care of these kids. I know it's tough to take care of, one kid, two kids. Some people have 5 kids. If you could just help out all the mothers out there. I want to pray for, for Russia. I want to pray for Ukraine. I want to pray for China. I want to pray for all these world leaders, so that they somehow just end up going to you instead of going to their, instead of going to their leadership, praying to you instead of trying to pray to all these polytheistic gods that don't even matter. Lord, please help these people out. Thank you so much for everything you do for us, Lord. We love you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Thank you guys so much. Gary, thank you again for coming on. And we really are blessed with all this knowledge. Jason, thank you, bro.
Thank you. Well, I gotta say, hey, bro. Gay. Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Josh. I love you guys, man. You guys have a good night.
You too.
Thank you, guys.